So I said to my wife, I'm getting moved, but nothing from the outcry outside, from Lord Pearson, who's a lord in the UK, making comments to make sure I'm safe.
The whole world's watching the failure and the attempt to mentally break a British journalist for daring to expose their...
Tommy Robinson's imprisonment has taken a dark turn. Reports suggest he's being held in solitary confinement for 23.5 hours a day, with access to only a single tin of tuna for sustenance.
How long you locked me up here for? And I expect them to come in with more charges. I expect them to try and do everything they can, because the public right now are listening.
As international figures like Elon Musk call for his release, we're left wondering, is this justice or a coordinated effort to silence a controversial voice? The answer may shock you. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now back to the video. Picture this. Tommy Robinson, once a firebrand activist, now confined to a small, sterile cell for 23 hours a day. The contrast between his former life of rallies and speeches and his current reality couldn't be starker. But is this extreme isolation truly necessary, or is it a calculated move to silence a controversial figure?
I know what they're going to do, yeah. What I believe they're going to do, and that I know no one can tell me why I was brought to that prison only.
Robinson's daily routine, as described by his supporters, reads like something out of a dystopian novel. Wake up on a thin mattress, eat bland food pushed through a slot, and stare at blank walls for hours on end. The occasional hour of exercise in a concrete yard offers little respite from the monotony. It's a far cry from the treatment most inmates receive, even those convicted of violent crimes. This stark difference in treatment raises eyebrows. Why such extreme measures for a man convicted of contempt of court? Prison reform advocates argue that solitary confinement should be a last resort, used only for the most dangerous inmates or those at risk of harm from others. Robinson, love him or loathe him, hardly fits that bill.
So I detailed to my wife that it's not about them. It's not about our children. It's about every child, everyone's.
The psychological toll of such isolation can be severe. Dr. Craig Haney, a psychology professor at the University of California, Santa Cruz, has studied the effects of solitary confinement for decades. He warns that prolonged isolation can lead to anxiety, depression, anger, cognitive disturbances, perceptual distortions, paranoia, psychosis, and self-harm.
For the defamation caused, but you shouldn't be incarcerated. And what Tommy Robinson did was break an injunction where he showed a film.
Is subjecting Robinson to these risks justified? Prison officials might argue that Robinson's high profile and controversial views make him a target, necessitating isolation for his own protection. But critics point out that other high-profile inmates are often housed in special units where they can interact with each other, not locked away in solitary confinement. The official justification for Robinson's treatment remains murky. His supporters claim that authorities have been tight-lipped about the reasons for his isolation.
It was a defamation case that was made against Tommy. No one typically goes to jail as a result of a civil action.
Fueling speculation about ulterior motives. Is this a case of protecting a vulnerable inmate, or a deliberate attempt to break the spirit of a man some see as a political dissident?
The world is watching. The more you try and crush us, the more you try and mentally break us, the more support we will gather.
As the debate rages on, one thing is clear. Robinson's treatment is far from standard. Whether you view him as a crusader for free speech or a dangerous rabble-rouser, the extreme nature of his confinement should give pause to anyone concerned with justice and human rights. While Robinson's physical isolation is troubling, an even more insidious form of punishment may be at play. What happens when you cut a man off, not just from human contact, but from information itself? The answer, it seems, is a near-total blackout of communication that's raising eyebrows among legal experts and free speech advocates alike.
So I said to my wife, I'm getting moved, but nothing from the outcry outside, from Lord Pearson, who's a lawyer in this UK, making comments to make sure I'm safe.
Reports suggest that Robinson's access to the outside world is severely restricted, far beyond what's typical for most prisoners. Phone calls, limited to a handful per month, and even those are allegedly monitored and cut short at the slightest hint of discussing his case. Visits from family and friends, reduced to a trickle with strict oversight. Letters screened, delayed, and sometimes never delivered at all.
These are people who are trying to get some kind of vicarious thrill from street violence that people like Tommy Robinson promote.
But it's Robinson's lack of media access that's particularly striking. Most prisoners, even those convicted of serious crimes, are allowed some form of contact with journalists. It's seen as a vital safeguard against abuses and a way to maintain transparency in the justice system. Yet Robinson, whose case has garnered international attention, finds himself in an information vacuum. Legal expert Jonathan Fisher QC weighs in. The level of communication restriction in Robinson's case is unusual, to say the least. While prisons have discretion in managing high-profile inmates, completely cutting off media access raises serious questions about the motivation behind such measures.
It's me believing that the worst will come.
That you will die in jail.
The worst will come, and I want my children to know that.
This information blackout extends beyond just Robinson himself. His legal team claims they've faced unprecedented obstacles in communicating with their client, hampering their ability to prepare appeals or address ongoing legal matters. It's a situation that's drawing comparisons to the treatment of political prisoners in authoritarian regimes, a comparison that's uncomfortable for a country that prides itself on its democratic values. Free speech advocate Emma Thompson from the Civil Liberties Union put it bluntly: when you start treating words and information as dangerous weapons, you've crossed a line. The question we need to ask is, what are they so afraid Robinson might say? Indeed, the extreme nature of these restrictions has fueled speculation about what information could be so dangerous that it warrants this level of control.
The whole world's watching the failure and the attempt to mentally break a British journalist for daring to expose their...
Are there aspects of Robinson's case that haven't come to light? Or is this, as his supporters claim, an attempt to silence a controversial voice? Despite the communication blackout, snippets of information have managed to leak out. A handwritten note, purportedly from Robinson,
Third month for solitary confinement within Woodhill Prison. After 42 days, they had to go to the government.
made its way onto social media last month. In it, he described his treatment as psychological torture and claimed he was being denied access to legal materials. While the authenticity of the note couldn't be independently verified, it sparked a fresh wave of outrage among his supporters. The treatment of Tommy Robinson has ignited a firestorm of controversy, raising alarming questions about the state of justice and free speech in the UK.
You know, no doubt about it, against Tommy Robinson. And then, of course, the judge decided to incarcerate him, which again seems disproportionate.
As international figures like Elon Musk weigh in and calls for UN intervention grow louder, the world watches with bated breath to see if transparency will prevail. This case may set a dangerous precedent for how controversial figures are handled by the system, potentially opening the door to silencing dissenting voices under the guise of legal procedures. The ripple effects of Robinson's imprisonment extend far beyond his individual circumstances. It's become a litmus test for the UK's commitment to democratic values and the right to challenge authority. As pressure mounts from both domestic and international sources, the British government finds itself at a crossroads. Will they double down on their current approach, or will they be forced to reassess their handling of Robinson's case in the face of growing scrutiny?